was saying why you have decided to study this particular topic. Thank you.
Again, I repeat my greetings. Good morning to everyone. Sabah al khair to my father and my mother in Gaza Strip. Thank you all. Thanks, Professor Gianni Silei, that you haven't left me in any step of my thesis. We know that I got too many problems, but I succeed to do it. Thanks to Professor Carlo Cheater for being the cooperation supervisor and accepting to support me in this thesis after you knew the situation. My title of the thesis was Rahman III succeed in creating a unified, strong, and civilized country, history and legacy. Starting about who's Abdurrahman III. He was one of the leaders in the time of when the Muslim people were controlling, conquering, as some of the Eastern scholars have mentioned, or doing the conquest as how we Muslims call it. I found it interesting speaking about the history of Andalusia or the history of Spain, because I'm speaking about 8 centuries and 10 years of the conquest of Islam in Spain, which is 2/3 of the history of Islam. And I found it interesting knowing about other cultural while I am a student of public and cultural diplomacy. So I wanted just to link some lines with each other to know if public and cultural diplomacy exist in the real history, exist in nowadays, if the Islamic culture still remain until nowadays in Spain, not just a topic or a matter of Muslim people as where they call it nowadays, just ISIS. The table of continent or the continent of my thesis spoke about how Muslims arrived to Spain. They came from Morocco by 2 leaders called Tariq bin Ziyad and Musa bin Nusayr. They separate Islam. They were too inspiring and interesting to spread the Islam in Europe. Like Europe in that time, we are speaking about dark ages, the medieval. And we cannot regret or ignore that the Islamic culture were or made Spain in a golden age, if we want to do a comparison with nowadays. After that, I spoke about 2 important leaders before Abdurrahman III arrived. One called Abdurrahman al-Dakhil, which he got kicked. All the Umayyad dynasty, the Umayyad, Al-Khilafah al-Umayyad were kicked from Al-Andalus because the Abbasid they didn't want anyone from the Umayyad son to stay in the rule of Islam in that time. And then I spoke about which thing Abdurrahman al-Dakhil had made or had changed, how the people were waiting the Umayyad dynasty to enter in Spain another time or to come to Andalusia another time. Then I started about who's Abdurrahman III, which challenges has he faced before he arrived to the rule, how he arrived to ruling the Muslim people in Andalusia after his grandfather make him growing up in a way or in a method to be a leadership while he was too young. And Abdurrahman III was a son of an Arabic father and a Spanish woman, a Spanish mother. So he was one of the called al-Muwalladin, like he was this mix between Muslims and Spanish people. And speaking about Abdurrahman al-Nasir personality, he was a diplomatic. He knew how to make Byzantine Empire, Germany, North Leon, all the people in Spain, in Andalusia in that time, in Andalus in that time, accepting him and loving him and giving him all the trust to lead them. Abdurrahman Nasir, before he came, before he arrived to the rule, Al-Andalus was in about to fall. Like they started from 711 and he arrived in 912. Spain in that time was about to fall. Like Al-Andalus wasn't a matter of staying anymore with Muslim people. They were, if we want to cooperate, to do a cooperation with nowadays, as Middle East now. Like they were civilian war. Every city has her own leader, their own government. So as a young leader, he came when he was 21 years old. He knew how to make Al-Andalus from Granada until Lyon, North France, one hand again. He knew how to give the minorities their rights, their duties, how to accept differences, how to accept every religion. Speaking about how Christians were acting and dealing with Jewish in that time, in the time of Goth, the Gothic Empire, they were totally not counting, like they were forced in one period before the Islamic Khilafat arrived in Spain. They were not counting as a human being, and Muslim leaders and acceptance of differences, culture and religion, has gave everyone his right to be what he wants. And then I mentioned, which in my third chapter, I mentioned how did Abdurrahman III, what he used as a military power, how he protect Spain from the seaside from any danger, how he tried to solve any problem with the first enemy, which he was Ibn Hafsan. He converted to Islam when the Muslim people arrive. And then in the time of Abdurrahman Nasir, when he came, Abdurrahman III, when he came, he changed again. He was one of the most dangerous enemy for Abdurrahman III. So he managed how to make the people under the control of Ibn Hafsan accepting to be one hand as all the Andalusi people, all the religion and cultural there. And Ibn Hafsan, he tried to run too much, but then he disappeared. And somehow, I cannot say he cared about education, he cared about libraries, he cared about science. European empires, all the European empires were sending their children in Al-Andalus, in Cordoba, to study to new art, architecture, translating movement. They were sending their children in Andalusia, trusting Muslim people there. And I have to mention in history now, linking with that I am from Palestine, and there is Israel are occupying our land. We never Muslim act in a bad or in respecting way with Jewish. Like Jewish people were living there. They were having their own cities in Al-Andalus, in Spain, and they were ruling the trend way, going and coming back from Europe, and they were saying to all Europe, there is this new people, this new Muslim people arrived to Spain. They have a new science. They have they make the life there from dark to light, and Jewish were a hand to separate, to spread the science that Muslim people were finding in that time. This is what I have in my table of content of the thesis.
Thank you, Sarah. And I leave the floor to Professor Chitter for his comments.
Okay, thank you. I found this dissertation somehow apologetic, which in my perspective is not necessary because it is known that Islamic religion is more tolerant.
That time.
Yeah.
I'm speaking about that time.
No, it is known because Islamic religion acknowledge that Christian and Jewish were part of a history, but it's not the opposite. So it is normal for an Islamic ruler to be tolerant because they were not properly wrong. And this is known from literary sources, but now we have also archaeological records. We have several churches from the Middle East to Spain, which were built and
Yes,
refurbished and restored long after the Islamic conquest. That means this is a sort of material proof of tolerance beyond the words in the texts. So it's not surprising that the Umayyads, after they left the Middle East, started making something in Spain, in a place where they found the Iberian and Roman population with a few Visigoths, few Germans. They were only few, scattered all around. And what is relevant in the archaeological debate today is how much did they develop agriculture, hydraulic systems, and water management was one of the main issues. So in my perspective, I'm not going to ask you anything, but maybe if you want to develop your work, you can have insight in archaeological record, which proves exactly what you state from literary sources. There's nothing. For instance, there are a series of churches. They were assumed to be late Visigothic churches because from an historian perspective, after the conquest, everything should have changed. Then they dated with a sample of mortar, and they found that they cannot be late Visigothic, they must be early Muslim churches. And we also the name Al-Andalus, that means lots of lands. It means that they were not acknowledged as a people, but as a series of lords. And we have also, for instance, the Cura de Tudmir is Theodomir is a Visigoth lord who was a ruler in the southeast. He managed with new rulers to stay in his position, just paying taxes. I could say this is a very Roman attitude. They just said, pay taxes and behave as you wish.
Yes.
So this is very, very easy access. So.
This called, how you mentioned, al-jizya. Like, if as how some of the historian wrote, it's a conquer. So it was the less bloody conquer. Because they were entering in any land saying to them, oh, guys, if you want to enter in Islam, you are very welcome. If you don't want, there is something called taxes. We fight against you. We protect you. You do whatever you want. This is your church. This is lands you can build, and you can develop yourself. Here are Jewish. You do your communities. You improve your languages. Jewish started to know their language in Spain. In the time of Andalusia, they started to translate their books from Arabic to Hebrew in there, speaking about poets. Other thing that in the archaeological side, Abdurrahman III, he decided in 929, he decided to change the Islamic empire from the ruler from Imarat to Khilafah. And that was something he opened, as how we say, a danger from another from Fatimi's empire. But he faced it and he said, I am Amir al-Mu'mineen, I am the new Khalifa, because he knew that he has this power to know how to rule a country, to rule a country. And this is, we cannot find nowadays, someone who's taking the whole Spain. Like if we speak about United States, every state has her own, every 4 states, they have their own majority. Not speaking about politics, speaking about the archaeological site. He built in 929 until 936 مدينة الزهراء. مدينة الزهراء where he decided to change the court and the castle, the palace of the Khalifa, from Cordoba to this new city. It's much more protected. He decided to make it the city of the Khalifa. And it was disappeared. He spent 1,800,000 dinar, and he called two architecture. One Ibn Musaylama, the other one is something Bin Ali from Alexandria, to build this city and to design it. And he brought to many things from Baghdad, from Tunisia, from Europe, putting in his own palace as a castle. They found this Medina, it were disappeared, hidden in the history because of Al-Fitna War in 1010. And in this century, in 20th century, thanks God, they some books were written from Bin Hayyan, from Bin Khaldun, from Ibn al-Tayyib, from those Arabic writers. It were written exactly what they founded nowadays from the archaeological site. And they are putting their UNESCO site. Tourists go there. It's fascinating them as a city, but at the same time, they are not using it as an archaeological site because there is no place for tourists to rest.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Other interventions from the floor? No? Okay, if you can please leave, Sarah and your guest, if you can leave the room, and we will decide for your final evaluation, and we will call you.
I will not wait until the end.
No, because you are the only one. You are the only one in presence, so we can proclaim you immediately.
I want to take photos after.
Maybe later, because now we are a bit tight because we have other students waiting online, and so you can also leave from this door. I don't know if it is open, but dogmas. You never know. There is not real proclamation. Okay, Ms. Sarah Dogmash, given the results of your academic career, this commission has approved your degree examination with a score of 90 out of 110. Therefore, by the powers conferred in us by the Chancellor and in the name of law, we proclaim you Dottore Magistrale in Public and Cultural Diplomacy, classe Studio e Cooperazione allo Sviluppo, LM81. Congratulations. No, we cannot shake hands. We can congratulate and wish you a successful future. Yes. No?
No.
No. Okay, so we can proceed with the second candidate, who is Nargis Panahali. Good morning.
Good morning, dear professors.
Good morning. Sorry we are a bit late, mostly for some problems I had. Okay, I just... Okay, so Nargis has prepared a dissertation on new era of diplomacy, public and cultural diplomacy from neuromarketing perspective.
Yes.
I leave the floor to your tutor, Professor Olmastroni, for an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Capineri. Just a few words to introduce this thesis, and then I think that Professor Innocenti will have some questions about your work as a co-supervisor. Yeah, this is an attempt to describe new patterns in public diplomacy and nation branding using the latest developments in communication technologies and marketing as an analytical framework. So there are two parts in the thesis, two main parts. One devoted to nation branding and developing the discipline of public diplomacy, and another one which is more innovative for social scientists on neuromarketing, centered on neuromarketing and strategies, research strategies in this particular field. So I will ask you to illustrate your thesis trying to bridge the two parts, so showing to what extent and how neuromarketing can be a useful approach to investigate research questions and issues in the field of public diplomacy and branding.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I would like to say that I have a background in branding and how to say, in marketing. And in my thesis, I decided to mix also the diplomacy, public and cultural diplomacy with marketing. And considering the developments in technology, marketing is also has also developed. And that's why I decided to look at public and cultural diplomacy from neuromarketing perspective. So I would like to show my presentation. I have a short presentation. If it's okay for you, I would like to show that.
You need to share.
Okay. So, can you see my presentation?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay. So the title of my thesis is New Era of Diplomacy, Public and Cultural Diplomacy from Neuromarketing Perspective. Here, the contents, New Era of Diplomacy. My thesis is divided to 3 parts. The first part is the New Era of Diplomacy. Here is included the evolution of diplomacy and the role of social networking services in public and cultural diplomacy, and intersections of diplomacy. The second part is about nation branding. Here is included nation branding as a root or a branch of diplomacy and how to build a nation branding. The third part is about neuromarketing. And in this part, I'll try to answer the questions, what is neuromarketing? And I'll try to give some information about theoretical framework and connection to public diplomacy. Firstly, if you look at the history of diplomacy, in history, states have sent delegations to other states for several reasons, for stopping wars, resolving hostilities, concluding treaties, or simply continuing friendly relations or continuing trade. By the end of 30 Years' War in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was made. This affair is considered as the beginning of contemporary diplomacy. By this peace, the ideas of independence and freedom of religion was invented. Another notion added to the theory of international affairs is foreign ministry, which had been used and created by Francis Cardinal Richelieu in 1626. This new term was accepted as a main object of the domestic interest. In the second slide, I would like to give information about the role and evolution of diplomacy. Technological developments experienced in the field of communication have deeply affected our lives. And in this picture, we can see the brief history of digital diplomacy. In the next slides, I will give information about digital diplomacy and other steps of diplomacy. And these technological developments draw us into a virtual world and cause the media and diplomacy to go beyond the classical styles. The role of SNS in public and cultural diplomacy. Countries use social media platforms, social network services, to communicate with politicians and people of foreign countries for conveying their messages, history, value, culture, and traditions. Especially when there are crises requiring an immediate response, proactive listening, responding, being involved, and communicating, being transparent can help reduce the negative effects of the crisis. And today, diplomacy is divided into 4. Diplomacy 1.0 represents classical diplomacy. In the light of international norms all bilateral or multilateral relations are included in this category in the light of diplomatic rules and agreements. In the modern world, especially from the 18th century, its rules and norms are starting to emerge slowly. In general, statesmen, foreign ministers, diplomats are the foremost actors of this field. What about the diplomacy 2.0? We call this diplomacy public diplomacy. The biggest difference from diplomacy 1.0 is that the propaganda machine, which was produced by the Nazis, in particular, was wanted to be eliminated by the Allied forces after the Second World War. Also, there was hardly any need for hard power-centered diplomacy. Public diplomacy was used a lot in the Cold War. Here, I'm going to give information about the intersections of diplomacy and information communication technologies. As a result of the rapid change in technology, states need to follow technological innovations very closely and focus on ways to somehow anticipate movements like the Arab Spring by listening to social data. From here, the concept of diplomacy 3.0, digital diplomacy, was born. Its founders are the USA and the UK. Recently, France, India, and Israel have been making big investments. For example, Israel's Ministry of Public Diplomacy, called Haspera, has been turned into a digital diplomacy structure. And diplomacy 3.0 reverses all methods, actors, and tools of classical diplomacy. It removes all the limits. Government buildings are closing, but the internet is always on, and everything is in real time. The brand new term diplomacy 4.0 is popular nowadays, and it contains the intersections of diplomacy with areas of digitalization, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, internet governance, and science diplomacy. Cybersecurity, cyber diplomacy is described as the application of diplomatic tools and so to the resolution of problems in cyberspace. And its mechanisms are still in their beginnings. That's why functional confusions are unavoidable. The aim of digital diplomacy is to improve a country's image by engaging with the public and achieving its foreign policy objectives. The aim of cyber diplomacy is to establish diplomatic techniques that are proportional to the challenge that exists in the cyber world. Every day, new threats emerge in cyberspace. Artificial intelligence. It's said that the best strategy is the strategy that minimizes the surprise effect. That's why artificial intelligence is one of the best tools to achieve this. In terms of national security, artificial intelligence technologies in internal security are generally used as decision support elements in the conduct of law enforcement activities. Internet governments. The convergence of normative requirements such as international human rights norms and political initiatives and priorities relating to internet government at national, international, and supranational level is necessary for the implementation of broadly agreed internet governance standards. The critical criteria should be applicable to every national level legislative initiative in the multilateral management of the internet, such as normative content requirements. In science diplomacy has proven to be very useful in promoting nuclear arms monitoring between USSR and Western researchers. Power structure.
Margit, I will ask you to focus on the neuromarketing part and the relationship with public diplomacy, since time is of essence.
Okay, it's the last slide of the second part. Now, first part. Now we are going to nation branding. Nation branding is the application of branding and marketing strategy approach in conjunction with more systematic campaigns to improve a country's profile. And sometimes national branding and public diplomacy are confused, and I'd like to give some different parts. For example, national branding aims to present positive image to the general masses in a one-sided way, but public diplomacy targets more specific groups culturally and politically. And national branding is intertwined with marketing, it has economic purposes. But public diplomacy is included in the international communication system and is often shaped around political purposes. And if you try to answer the question how to build the national branding, I'd like to present Simon Anholt's national branding hexagon. Here is included the parts export, governance, investment and immigration, culture and heritage, people and tourism are the main parts of the national branding. After this, while doing my research, I found the interview of Jose Felipe Torres. He is the Plum Consulting CEO, and he was explaining what is national brand. Here are the parts that determining what does the nation really need to be recognized for: stakeholder participation, policy making, synchronizing real world and virtual activities, and marketing are the parts and steps of nation branding. And here's the third part of my thesis. It's about public and cultural diplomacy from neuromarketing perspective. Firstly, if we try to answer the question, what is neuromarketing? The concepts such as social media, e-commerce, CSR projects, big data increase the importance of marketing. Today, human senses are at the center of marketing 4.0. At this point, the concept of neuromarketing comes into play. Traditional marketing research is insufficient to explain consumer behavior. The idea of neuromarketing has arisen for obtaining entry to this data. Neuromarketing is the implementation of neuroscience methods to customers in order to understand how the human mind responds to a particular product or decision. And there are many different methods are used for neuromarketing research, which are used instead of traditional methods or with traditional methods in marketing research all over the world. There are three types of these measurements. The first type is neurometric measurements. The second is biometric measurements, and the third one is psychometric measurements. The first one, neurometric measurements, are used to measure the neural activities in our brain to detect the cognitive and emotional responses of our brain. Some of the most known neurometric measurements are made with fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, EEG,
Margit, can you skip this part and jump to the conclusion, because we do not have time otherwise? I will ask you again to show the important insights that we can get from neuromarketing in the discipline of public diplomacy. This is my main question for you.
Okay. In this part, now I'm not going to give information about the theoretical framework and its connection to public diplomacy. Do you need for this? I'd like to give some hypotheses and models that it is public diplomacy. There are some models I have mentioned here: Marshallian model, Pavlovian model, Freudian model, and Verblanian model, and Hobbesian model. The Marshallian model is among the most popular models. The choices to purchase things or in the decision-making process, according to this model, these are the result of rational decision-making. This hypothesis arose in Adam Smith's papers and theorizing the notion that customers are completely logical, and when making choices with an economic personality, we may say fully conscious. The researchers also introduced another Pavlovian model, which is based on learning theory. This framework includes a few basic principles such as impulse, suggestion, reaction, and relapse. The position of conditioning in the experience was only highlighted by this method. And the other three models, including the Freudian, Verblanian, and the Hobbesian model, are also discussed by Cato and Teodorescu. Freud's psychoanalytic theory, describing the actions of the customer in the context of cultural and biological aspects. This study focused on the analysis of the behavior and motivation of the people. The Verblanian framework characterized the actions of the people through the means to obtain status in society, becoming more of a social model. And the Hobbesian model, also named the model of organizational consideration, formulates the principle that man would concentrate on logical factors relevant to the organizations or the state's benefit within the mechanism. I'd like to say that these neuromarketing tools can be used also in public and cultural diplomacy, because here is also in diplomacy, states try to sell their, I mentioned here in nation branding, their tourism, their culture and heritage, and to show their culture and heritage to the world. In this period also, for learning, for researching the decision-making processes of the people, these kind of tools, neuromarketing tools, can be helpful.
Okay,
And
thank you.
thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Margaret. And I give the floor to Professor Innocenti. Okay, I don't know if you could hear, but Professor Innocenti is happy with your presentation. And so we thank you for illustrating your work. And we will reconvene later for the official proclamation. We still have two more. We still have two more. So try again. Let's say at around 11. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe a bit earlier. 10 to 11. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye bye, Nargis. See you later. Okay, we can proceed with your presentations. And next candidate is Gameli Kobena Samafo. Gamel, are you there?
Yes, Professor, I'm here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay.
I would like to dive straight into my presentation.
Okay, just a minute. Just a minute that I introduce your work and your tutor.
Very well.
Okay. The title of your dissertation is Football in Ghana and its relationships with the rest of the world.
Exactly.
I am the your tutor, and also I think Professor Innocenti and Professor Olmastroni. I have read your work, and it mainly describes the role of football and sport in general to foster international relations. So if you can please tell the commission, the board, a summary of your dissertation, try to be well, let's say to speak around 10 minutes or so, and then we leave the floor to Professor Ormastone and Innocenti for their comments.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like you rightfully said, my dissertation is on football in Ghana and its relationship with the rest of the world. One may ask why, because football in itself is not just leisure, but it also fosters a socioeconomic development. I decided to focus on this topic for three main reasons. One is because there's been a dearth of literature on the impact on football migrants from the host country, and I decided to add my voice to this. The second part has to do with the fact that there's been a decline in interest in the Ghana Premier League for some time now, and I decided that this literature can throw more light on some of the things that we are not looking at back in Ghana. And the third has to do with the fact that I am a migrant, and football is a game I love very much. So I decided to make both into education. So going forward, these are the areas that I decided to look at. Like I said earlier, and my research objectives were very simple. The first one is to know the relation or what the roles the GFA plays in player transfer. Second is to know what are the determinants of player movement, and the third has to do with the differences and similarities between an average migrant and a sports person. So to do this, I devised the methodology of qualitative with a sample data of 20 male with the ages between 26 to 50, with a experience ranging from 5 to 20 years. And then my respondents were footballers, sports analysts, club administrators, and staff from the GFA. One may ask, why all male? Well, the sad truth is the Ghana sports industry is dominated by men. So so that is the reason why my dissertation or my target audience focuses on men. My dissertation was a very easy one because it was very flexible, semi-structured in a way that respondents could chip in more questions or more answers outside the terrain of my research. And the research was also conducted in an environment which was conducive, and at the time was also conducive for the respondent, meaning they chose the time and place the interview could be held. So upon after the interview, the realization was that the GFA plays two roles, but not. Let me say that the GFA role is not limited to what is here, but these are the major roles the GFA plays in player transfer in Ghana. The first of all, the GFA prevents unprofessional acts like tapping up, bribery, and corruption, and also protect the vulnerable. One may ask, what is tapping up? Well, tapping up is in football is a process where a player who is playing for Team A is convinced or lured by Team B without the knowledge of the current team. Tapping up is not illegal in football. However, it is seen as an unprofessional move. And tapping up can occur across borders, meaning it can happen between a local teams where one club decides to lure a player of another club, or it can happen across the borders. And when it happens within Europe, within Africa, it's usually overlooked. But I must say, this makes the GFA job really ineffective. Why? Because the GFA has to issue an international transfer certificate, which is the ITC. Without this certificate, the transfer might be deemed incomplete. This brings about some consequences, but they have clubs have been able to maneuver their way around this for a very long time until the introduction of the TMS system, which is the transfer management system by FIFA in 2011 to help curb some of these nuances. Going forward, the second role of the GFA in player transfer is an advisory role. They advise players as to the work permit requirements on international level, and also without a work permit, FIFA may attempt to block one's transfer from going into play. The second phase of my dissertation focuses on the determinants of player movement, that are the push and pull factors. The push and pull factors here are factors that attract or push people to move from one place to another. And the push factors here are underutilization. Many footballers in Ghana feel they are underutilized, or their potential will not be fully grown in the country they find themselves in with the current state of things. So this is a motivator for them to ply their trade outside. A pull factor here is high wages. We can all agree to a large extent that high wages, we all want to retire on a very good salary, and high wages plays a very important role in that. That being said, everyone wants to develop their opportunities and have growth in their career. Career growth in terms of local football has been on a diminishing return. Why am I saying this? Over the past tournaments, over the past years, tournaments being played by Ghana has a little of, say, a maximum of 3 local players. It means to be able to be called onto the national team, one has to ply the trade outside to be recognized into the national team. So many players, they start with the local teams and with the intention of moving outside to develop their trade. I'm moving to the third phase of my dissertation, which is the similarities and differences between the average migrant and the football player from Ghana. And I might say the similarities here is quite obvious. They both require a work permit and a visa to apply their trade in a destination country. However, when it comes to the differences, a sports migrant already has an employment contract in the destination country, but the same cannot be said for many average migrants, because they are moving, many of them move without already having a job. This is to also say that with or without a job, an average migrant would move, but in many cases, the same cannot be said for a sports migrant. This is where I would end my 3 topics, and then I will move to the survey questions. These are the questions that I asked of my respondents. And like I said, I previously stated, the questions were not limited to this. It went beyond this, in which I'm grateful to my respondents and my supervisors for giving me the flexibility to be able to. In conclusion, I would say the GFA, which is a FIFA representative in Ghana, is doing a tremendous job in organizing football leagues for the national teams. However, I think this can be improved with more focus centered on the local players, as well as companies within who look to help footballers grow in the nation. I would end here, and I'll say thank you very much to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Gamel,
The end.
for your presentation. I don't know if there are comments from Professor Mastroni, Professor Innocenti. Okay, we are satisfied with your presentation. So please, if you can reconvene at around 10 to 11 for the official proclamation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Buongiorno Chiara.
Buongiorno, buongiorno. Innanzitutto scusatemi,
No, è colpa nostra, abbiamo...
sarei connessa a brevissimo, quindi scusate se vi ho fatto aspettare un attimo, ma stavo finendo di
Nessun problema, anzi,
Sono...
tiri il fiato, stia tranquilla, tutto
Guardi, siamo stati senza luce in casa fino a 5 minuti fa, quindi c'era un blackout, quindi eravamo un attimo fuori di testa, si può dire, perché non ci aspettavamo, insomma, che andasse via la luce, quindi sì, eccoci.
Bene, allora introduco il suo lavoro e
Sì?
poi passo la parola al relatore.
Sì.
Okay, so Chiara Mascelloni is preparing and presenting her dissertation of freedom of expression and hate speech, recent developments in the search for balance. And your tutor is Professor Lenzerini, and I give the floor to Federico for a short introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, this is a very interesting thesis. I would say that in this work there are some unusual features, and I'm saying that in very positive terms, because of course it is a legal dissertation, but given the topic that the candidate has decided to address, there are also political, diplomatic, sociological, and to some extent anthropological implications. It is a very difficult topic. The question that the candidate tries to answer is, what is the dividing line between freedom of expression and hate speech? Which is a very difficult question indeed. No? There are some interesting cases addressed by human rights monitoring bodies, which, if they would not be really said, they could be defined as funny because some decisions are quite difficult to accept in considering expressions of the liberty of the person to express himself or herself when it comes to situations of hate speech. Unfortunately, in recent times, hate speech is increasing, and this is a huge problem, due to a number of different reasons. For example, the social media, for example, the influence of some important political leaders. And then there is also another element which is influencing our life in the past few years now, which is the COVID-19 pandemics. I remember very well at the beginning of the pandemics, many people were saying that, okay, we have to experience this unusual situation, but we are sure that at the end of it, we will rediscover the solidarity, between us. And unfortunately, it seems to me that we are achieving exactly the opposite outcome. So I would like the candidate exactly to start from this point, if possible. Can you illustrate the Commission, what has been in the past couple of years, the influence of the pandemic on the situation of hate speech, please?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would like to say that hate speech is something that we are hearing a lot about on the news, on the internet. Its diffusion on the internet is astonishing. But the starting point, I would like to make a premise. The starting point is that despite its presence, there isn't actually a definition yet, a legal definition. And this is something that immediately complicates the framework in which we are moving. Because if there isn't, uniformity across regions, across legal systems, across legislations, then it becomes quite difficult to address this issue. So, broadly speaking, we can say that hate speech encompasses all those communications, whether they are written or spoken, that incite hate and in any case result detrimental towards the end of a person or a group of people, a minority, on the grounds of, their culture, their provenience, their sexual orientation, their gender, their religion, and so forth. All of these factors may be reasons to discriminate. We need to say that hate speech is transversal, it's multidisciplinary, and it has a strong need to be tackled promptly and swiftly, because if not, then the chances of escalating into its worst consequence, which is hate crime, are rather high. So hate crimes are also another, intertwined feature of hate speech that we have addressed throughout the dissertation. And it's also striking that they verse in an even worse legislative condition than hate speech. And this is because often the victims are burdened by guilt and shame for what happened to them, for the incidents and for the insults or for the attacks. And so they choose not to report hate crimes. Therefore, when we see hate crimes data, yeah, we can consider them, but they're probably going to be underestimated. So hate speech and hate crimes are present, are real, are escalating, but we have basically no adequate instrument to tackle them. Okay, so this is just a general and broad overview in order to understand what we're talking about. I would also like to say, before answering Professor Lenzerini's question, that we have to say, this is important, that this is not a brand new phenomenon. It has always existed. It was maybe perpetrated differently, because right now we have internet and social media, and we can get, we can write a comment and it can get to the other part of the world in a matter of seconds. It was perpetrated differently, yes, but it was there because you can take anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, genocides in Turkey, in Rwanda, China's crusades against Tibet, the most actual Uyghur purge, which is happening right now in the province of Xinjiang. All of these events throughout history have a common denominator, which is hate. Hate towards what is different, what is perceived as other, something that is not us, us versus them. Therefore, it is quite serious that we currently don't have any means to counteract something that has always existed. And this is very visible, and I get to what Professor Lenzerini was mentioning with the current pandemic of COVID-19, because as we all know, it originated in China at the end of 2019. And since that moment, countless people of Chinese origins or descent, or even people born in other countries from Chinese parents who maybe have never even set foot in China, have been attacked, insulted. There's been a massive wave of xenophobia towards them because they have been linked to the pandemic, something that, of course, is groundless, because Chinese people absolutely have no guilt, no fault for the outbreak of the pandemic. And therefore, we have witnessed a surge in hate speech online, especially, and hate crimes perpetrated, in real life, which has been astonishing. I found that this has been aggravated by the behavior of some prominent political figures. First and foremost, it is impossible not to mention former President Donald Trump. because, as you may know, the World Health Organization strongly advises against renaming a disease after, you know, a place or a group of people, culture, a region. In any case, any identifiable feature that may bring harm to the population which is connected to the name. So they came up with a name which is SARS-CoV-2, but we have witnessed Donald Trump calling COVID-19 the China plague, the Kung flu, the China virus, and when political figures hold such behavior, they are implicitly condoning the same behavior held by common people. And so I may think, if my president is referring to it as the China virus and is saying that it is Chinese's fault, then I can say too, I can do the same. It is okay for me to go on the internet and write unspeakable stuff about Chinese. So there is at least I think, I found there is a link between political behavior, political attitude, and what a citizen perceive to be okay, to be acceptable, you know, and they proceed to do it. In fact, in America alone, time today would not suffice to mention all of the incidents, the hate-related incidents that I've found, because they are countless, but we can mention, just to understand the magnitude of this situation, we can cite an 89 years old woman who was set on fire in New York, Asian, of course, a Filipino man who was cut with a knife across the face while riding the tube. He received approximately 100 stitches and was not helped by the other commuters. We can mention a woman who was attacked with acid. We can mention a woman who was attacked with a hammer because she was wearing a face mask, something that is, you know, mandatory because it's one of the few things we can do to avoid the spreading of COVID. These are just, you know, some examples. We could bring lots more. But what lies beneath them is that they don't have a clear motive. There wasn't a robbery, there wasn't a motive other than the fact that these people were Asians and they were bringing COVID-19. People who attacked them, they didn't want them there, even if it was their home or they were born in the United States, whatever. It's just that they didn't want them there. It's hateful. And also what I find interesting of this, if you can pass me the word, about this behavior is that often hate is linked with ignorance, because we have witnessed countless episodes of people assuming other people's identity solely basing on the physical appearance. So you have elongated eyes, then you're Chinese, even if you're a Filipino or you're from whatever other part of Asia. So this implicitly sends the message that if your features differ the one of the majority, then you're not actually a national. You're not part of that nation. So this builds on the sentiment of alienation of communities, of small communities, of minorities, not just the Asian, but communities in general. The feeling of extraneation, alienation from the majority is powerful and is what contributes to them not reporting these hate crimes. I was able to find, to read, to explore the ones that were reported, but what about the myriads that were surely not reported? What about them? And I would also like to mention that we must not think that this is just an American problem, because this would be misleading. And we cannot say that only America is racist, only America is full of hate, because this would be dismissing a problem, not seeing a problem that is real, it's there, and it's everywhere. I was able to find the same patterns in UK, in France, in Italy, and I think Italy is a very apt example, because as we all know, shortly after the beginning of the pandemic, we were hit, and we were hit hard, and we became the epicenter of the Western pandemic. You know, we were the plague spreaders, and we were shunned, we were attacked. Of course, speaking of Italians living abroad, we suffered the same discrimination that other communities suffer every day. But when people who usually are on the other end of the line lament what actually happens to other people every day, I think it's really shown how groundless this behavior is. Because if you are shunning me only because I have an Italian passport, it's foolish. It has no grounds. Maybe I haven't been in Italy for the past 10 years, but you see me as Italian, so you see me as COVID-19. And this builds on the fact that hate speech, hate in general, has no grounds. It's just fear of the other, as I said earlier. And it may, it's easily to see how groundless it is, you know. So the pandemic, combined with the attitude of politics and of, I would say upper tiers, the both of them combined have impacted hugely the everyday lives of minorities. And also something that is less mentioned, but not less important, mental health of minorities, because constantly being shunned, attacked, spited, not only by people, but by your political class, may impact more than your physical health. It may impact long-term mental health. I would like also to say that probably we are starting to witness some small signs of change, or at least of acknowledgement, because at the end of May 2021, just a month ago, the newly elected President Biden of the United States signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. It's not much, but it's a start. So we may be witnessing the starting of something new, because if there is a moment in which hate speech and hate crimes are going to be acknowledged and regulated, is now, because governments and people alike have never been more interested, more invested in these issues rather than now. We are all listening, political class and people alike. We're there, we're listening. So, of course, these kinds of change take years to develop. It's not going to be something that happens from day to night, but it's happening, and it's going to be impacting millions of lives, because hate speech and hate in general is something that dehumanizes, the victims, therefore making their lives nearly impossible. So if and when the political class is going to see that we need a definition for start, we need a universally shared definition, we need laws, and we need a framework in which we can move in order to tackle this issue, then probably minorities will start to be better off.
Yes, Chiara, I totally agree with you, and it's a good point that it's a good fact that at the end of your thesis there is some space for optimistic elements, no? Especially through referring to this new American legislation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chiara. Do you have other? Do we have other comments from? Yes.
Just few words. You've already answered to my question. I was interested in the role of social media, and you answered very well. And I totally agree with you. I've appreciated your attempt to deal with a new and at the same time old phenomenon. Nothing new, as you very well have underlined in your research. The search for a scapegoat is ancient as human being. Very, very well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chiara. Now, if you can leave the meeting and then reconvene, let's say in 5-10 minutes, and we will come to the official proclamation.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we can start with the official proclamation. Nargis, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Miss Nargis Konali, given the results of your academic career, this commission has approved your degree examination with a score of 99 out of 110. Therefore, by the powers conferred in us by the Chancellor and in the name of law, we proclaim you Dottore Magistrale in Public and Cultural Diplomacy in Classe LM81 of Cooperation for Development. Congratulations and good luck for your future and your career.
Thank you very much.
And unfortunately, the celebration is not as warm as it should be in presence, but we are, of course, all near to all our students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nargis, and bye-bye. Now it's Gameli. Gameli, are you there?
Yes, Professor, I'm here.
Good.
I'm here.
You are not playing football.
No, please.
Okay, okay. And if okay, I can proceed with your proclamation. So, Gamel Kobena Samafo, given the results of your academic career, this commission has approved your degree examination with a score of 97 out of 110. Therefore, by conferred in us by the Chancellor and in the name of the law, we proclaim you Dottore Magistrale in Public and Cultural Diplomacy in Class LM81, Cooperation for Development. Congratulations, and we wish you a successful and happy future. Also healthy at this time, we can say safe.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now we come to the last candidate, Chiara Mascelloni. Ms. Chiara Mascelloni, given the results of your academic career, this commission has approved your degree examination with a score of 110 out of 110 cum laude. Therefore, by the powers conferred in us by the Chancellor, in the name of law, we proclaim you Dottore Magistrale in Public and Cultural Diplomacy in Class LM81, Cooperation for Development. Congratulations, and we wish you, as all the others, a happy and successful future. Okay.
Mic was off. I was saying thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you.
Okay, so I thank everybody, and I can close the session for this morning. Okay, thank you, and bye-bye.